Well, certainly there are many questions being asked right now about the impact of tariffs, and it really runs the gambit of different sectors out there right now. Right now, we're going to talk about the potential impact that tariffs might have on the airline industry. And a pleasure to be joined by Wharton's Gad Allon. Gad, great to talk to you again. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? It's great to be here.
Thank you. Look, obviously, the question of tariffs, I think, is something that, and I would guess you would agree with me that it's so multifaceted for so many different companies and business sectors right now.
Yeah, because over the last 25 years, we made every possible product as cheap as possible, and that meant to make it made all over the globe. And now we have to start collecting these pieces again. And for most firms, they don't really know when they make things. They know where they make things, but they don't know where their suppliers are making them. In which case, I mean, we talk about wide and deep implications.
So when you talk about the airline industry and maybe even the manufacturing side, where are the potential areas of impact that tariffs could have an influence on?
So I think it starts really as simple. If you look at what happened with the 787, the Boeing plane. Boeing is a way to try to expedite the time to make it and reduce its cost of making that. Made it as one of the biggest worldwide projects in terms of production, right? So just to give you an idea, that there are components made in Japan, because otherwise you cannot sell to ANA. There are components made in Italy, because otherwise you cannot sell to the Italian airlines, Alitalia. And so there are components made everywhere. In the short term, what does that mean? In the short term, it means that actually there are continuously, you need many of these components to maintain your plane. Planes requires maintenance continuously. If you prefer to have doors not fly off the plane in the middle of the flight, it helps to try to maintain the plane. And this maintenance is going to increase, right? Because that means that every component that is brought into the US now has to be paid. There are some tariffs to be paid. So in the short term, we talk about probably some 5 to 10% increase for airlines to maintain these planes. In the midterm, the entire plane is going to become more expensive, right? Because being now we're going to get into the fact that there is going to be probably attempts to try to bring more of that capacity to the US back, and that's going to make things more expensive. That means that there is no capacity. So I expect in the midterm for the cost to go even higher. Long term, I think it's hard to know, right? I mean, I think there's a whole realignment now of what is viewed as an ally and what countries will be able to sell to other countries. But I think if the airlines run on very low margins, and as such, it's not they can absorb these costs. It might be that Boeing will absorb some of these costs, but Boeing is not in a great shape either, given what happens now. So you don't really have too many places that can be absorbed, and so the only ones going to absorb it are us as consumers.
Wouldn't the expectation be to a degree that the consumer would feel some of this, the traveler would feel some of it as we move forward, the longer that tariffs have an impact?
Yes, I mean, the short-term, I think, impact is low, right? It's primarily maintenance. Because these planes are already in the air, most of the work is done by people, so it's not like most of the cost is already absorbed in what we have. So it's primarily some small, but primarily maintenance. Midterm, I think that's where we see the big impact, because I think the planes that are not supplied yet, the planes that are being built now, you need to have much deeper overhaul of planes. Then again, I think airlines, I mean, as the price of these planes are going to go higher and the maintenance is going to be more expensive, ticket price will have to absorb it. I mean, airlines are not in the place where they can actually say, well, we're going to absorb some of that is ticket prices. So ticket price is going to go up. We're going to see potentially fewer planes flying, potentially maybe cancellation of lines that as we get into supply chain disruptions and higher costs, airlines might have to prioritize which routes are more profitable and direct planes there. We might see older planes in the air, right? I mean, and older planes mean like potentially, we have this long streak recently of accidents and mishaps. We might see more of that. Airlines are going to be, hopefully not, but will potentially delay a lot of that. So we'll see, I think, even the impact. I think some of that will be ticket prices because of shortage, some of that will be ticket prices because of the expenses, some of that will be just like fewer routes, some of that are going to be lower quality planes.
You mentioned supply chain. When you think about how the parts are delivered to the manufacturers or delivered in repairs being done by the airlines themselves, where are the areas of focus where supply chain could be impacted because of tariffs?
Almost everything, like I would say the most important one are probably the engine and the landing gear. Engine is done in different places, but I mean the landing gear, for example, is out offshore then brought in. Like if you look at the model of what Boeing did with the 787, disassembled the fuselages. Boeing is essentially just a large scale aggregator. They just like Lego, they put everything together. But each one of these fuselages, every different component is made in a different country. And so each one of these, right, there is a supplier in Israel that supplies a component to a subcontractor, then supply to Boeing. There is one in Italy. There is like literally in every single country there is one. And so like these are suppliers that are now going to be expected to pay these tariffs. And so like ultimately is an attempt to try to realign the supply chain. We'll try to bring it to a place where we have lower tariffs potentially. And lower tariffs, however, means that there is currently at least not enough capacity to provide things at the rate we need them.
How much does this challenge then Boeing specifically when you think about all that that company has gone through over the last few years and trying to get itself back to what I think we historically considered Boeing to be going back a few decades?
Yeah, I don't think it's specifically to Boeing. I think this is going to hit Airbus. Airbus over the last few years built more and more capacity in the U.S. surprisingly, right? So they have in Mobile, Alabama, and like a fairly big plant, primarily because to be able to sell in the U.S. to airlines, they needed to have a manufacturing here in the U.S. The south of the U.S. became low-cost manufacturing in many countries compared to many countries, and so the same way it's like actually quite interesting that if you look at automotive, we see something similar to that, where the U.S. firms moved manufacturing to Mexico and Canada, but it's the German firm that actually brought the manufacturing to the U.S. So I think we'll see Airbus is almost like as exposed as Boeing, primarily because the playbook was a similar playbook. If you want to sell to more airlines, you need to be as global as possible.
When you think about the air carriers themselves, are the lower budget carriers impacted similar to what, say, the Americans and the Deltas would be impacted, or is there a different level of impact?
I would say the low costs are definitely impacted more. I mean, they have just fewer place for them to absorb it. Primarily in the US, where they were squeezed quite a bit. Like if I look at Europe, for example, Ryanair managed overall to do well, so I'm sure that they have, and they will never pride themselves on the newest planes and never pride themselves on complex flights. So I think the ones that are going to be exposed more are the ones that actually maintain a higher level of safety or don't have the balance sheet and the income statement to try to absorb it. So low-cost airlines are going to be hit. Complex airlines are going to be hit like that. Simpler airline like Ryanair, probably less so.
Gad, great to talk to you today. Thanks very much for your time. All the best.
It was great to be here.
Thank you. Gad Allon of the Wharton School.